All right, in section 3 today, we're going to talk about completing our worksheet and then finding any errors that might exist in our worksheet. So the big thing here is we're going to talk about what accounts are going to be balance sheet, what accounts are going to be income statement. We're going to total and rule our worksheet, and then if we need to, fix any errors. So at the end of a fiscal period, the main thing that we need to do is prepare our financial statements from the information that we have on our worksheet. And so at this point, we now have up-to-date account balances, okay, for our supplies and our insurance, and we've extended those columns for the financial statements. So this is something that you're just going to have to remember, and the more you use it, the just like figuring out what's debits and credits, the more you figure that out, and the more you use it, the easier it will be. But the two financial statements that we have are balance sheets and income statements. Our balance sheet is simply a financial statement that reports the value of a business's assets, liabilities, and owner's equity on a specific date. So, with that being said, the accounts that are used on the balance sheet are assets, liabilities, and owner's equity. One way you can try to remember that is that assets, liabilities, and owner's equity is the accounting equation, and we always want that to be in balance. So that's how I always remember it. If you figure out a different way or something easier, you go right ahead, but that's how I remember balance sheet. So what happens here, you can see here's a completed worksheet. Here's our trial balance columns. Here's our adjustment columns. And so now we will put none of these in the income statement because, as you can see, cash, petty cash, accounts receivable, supplies, prepaid insurance, those are all our assets. We've got two accounts payable, which are liabilities, and we've got a capital and a drawing account, which are owner's equity. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to transfer all of our information over to the balance sheet column. Please make sure that you get these in the right columns, because if you don't, that is going to be an issue. Okay. The ones you need to be careful for are obviously supplies and prepaid insurance, because we started with 620, but we had an adjustment of 530, so your up-to-date balance is 90. Same thing with we started with 900, we had an adjustment of 150, so our up-to-date balance is 750. So make sure that you remember to update those balances when you're transferring over. And then of course we have our credit balances and the drawing account. Our second financial statement is an income statement. An income statement essentially shows the revenue and expenses for a fiscal period. Revenue is the money we make, expenses is the money that we spend. So the difference between those two is going to tell us whether we made a net income or whether we have a net loss. So the two types of accounts that are on the income statement are revenue and expenses. So these typically will fall at the bottom of your worksheet. So we have our sales, and then we have all of our expenses. Again, make sure you get these in the right column. These are income statements, so they go here under the income statement debit or income statement credit. Again, we have our sales balance, we have all of our other expenses. Again, making sure to notice that insurance expense started with nothing, but then we had a debit for an adjustment, so its up-to-date balance is 150. Same thing with supplies. We started with nothing. We had a debit of 530, which means we have an up-to-date balance of 530 in supplies expense. So we just want to make sure that we do that correctly. So now that we have our accounts in the right financial statement columns, we can figure out whether we made a net income or a net loss. Our net income is the difference between total revenue and total expenses if revenue is greater, meaning revenue, remember, is the money that we made, expenses are what we spent. So if we made more than we spent, we have an income, okay? So before we can complete our worksheet, we have to figure out our net income. Once we've done that, the worksheet can be totaled and ruled. So I'm just going to pull this down. This is a completed worksheet. This is what we are working towards right now. So making sure that we're in their correct columns, we would look to where our revenue is. Okay, so we're going to single rule here, right across here, and we total income debit, income credit, balance sheet debit, balance sheet credit. And then once we have those totals in here, we look at whether or not we made a net income. And remember, we can do that by looking at our income statement, credit and debit. Since our credit, which is our sales, is the money that we made that was greater than the money that we spent, which is all of our expenses, we have a net income of $3,162. We put that in the income statement debit column because eventually we want all of these numbers to equal. So it goes income statement debit, balance sheet credit, and those equal each other, so we're happy. There could be a potential for you to have a net loss. If it happens that way, it would be an income statement credit and a balance sheet debit, and then you still would end up being equal. Okay. And we will go through and we will do this in our work together. So don't worry about this so much. We'll do this in a little bit. But you may want to reference this slide when you end up doing your workbook for Chapter 6, because you will need to make sure that your rulings are correct. Okay, so as I was just saying, you could end up with a net loss. That means that your expenses are greater than your revenue. All that means is you spent more than you made that month. And so, like I said, this is what a net loss would look like. It's an income statement credit and a balance sheet debit. You can see that your expenses are greater than your revenue, so you have to put your income statement credit here. And then they still should equal when you're all said and done. Now, there are several types of errors that could happen when you're working on your worksheet. There could be errors in the accounting records, so meaning that you made a mistake before you even got to your worksheet. There could be errors when you're doing calculations, or you could put information in the wrong column. And if that happens, there's ways that we can go about fixing those. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to our work together. So let's head on over to MindTap, and we will do our 6-3 work together and wrap up our worksheet.